Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is the evening of the 3rd of May here in the United Kingdom. And I have no idea what's going on because my Streamlabs would not connect to my YouTube on the basis of something in my description for this video. So I'll have to put a description in afterwards. I get the feeling I'm being targeted. Paranoia. Anyway, I decided I wouldn't put on my usual music, but I will give you this.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
I'm looking at a little bit of history here. A little bit of history taking us back to 1962. This is from history.com. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, leaders of the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in a tense 13-day political and military standoff in October 1962 over the installation of nuclear-armed Soviet missiles on Cuba, just 90 miles from United States shores. In a TV address on October the 22nd, 1962, President John F. Kennedy, 1917 to 1963, notified Americans about the presence of the missiles, explained his decision to enact a naval blockade around Cuba, and made it clear the US was prepared to use military force if necessary to neutralize this perceived threat to national security. Following this, John F. Kennedy and the Russian president, I think it was Khrushchev, they got together. There was a big standoff, as it says here, and it became known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the Cold War really got quite warm, and everybody was really worried about a nuclear war. Why? Because the United States was not prepared to have Russian missiles 90 miles away from the United States. What does that make you think of? This was on February the 28th in 2022 from The Guardian. Thinking through the Ukraine crisis, the causes. It would be extraordinarily difficult to expand NATO eastward without that actions being viewed by Russia as unfriendly. Even the most modest schemes would bring the alliance to the borders of the old Soviet Union. Some of the more ambitious versions would have the alliance virtually surround the Russian Federation itself. These words were written in 1994 in this person's book, Beyond NATO, Staying Out of Europe's Wars. And what have we done? We have put states right on the border of the Russian Federation. We have placed them as NATO states. They are NATO states. The Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, I think there's another one. I'm not sure it's Lithuania, but it might be. There's 3 NATO countries. And in 2008, NATO actually wrote at the end of its conference in 2008, Ukraine and Georgia will join NATO. Georgia, of course, took this as a message that, hey, we can poke the bear. So without having joined NATO, Georgia decided to cause some major infractions with Russia, and Russia invaded Georgia and basically slapped their arses, told them not to be silly and to stay neutral. Russia, prior to February the 24th, 2022, had been telling NATO and the United States of America all the way back to around about 1991, do not put missiles, do not make countries on our border NATO. So the Cuban Missile Crisis that very, very nearly led to the end of humanity back in 1962, if that's what you believe it really was. I mean, it was a long time before I was born, so I'm only using the old history books or what is written in wherever. Allegedly, we got very, very close to nuclear war. And now, well, then that was because the United States was very, very concerned about its own security. What happens now? NATO threatens Russia. Russia says, we're really concerned about our security. And NATO says, I don't give a damn. And everybody starts telling Russia, you do not have a leg to stand on. You don't have anything to say. Ukraine is an independent country and Ukraine can choose to be a NATO member if it wishes. It can have NATO troops in it. It can have NATO missiles in it. And Russia, you can do nothing about it. That is essentially what NATO and the West has said directly to Russia. And Russia went, get stuffed. Russia went absolutely get stuffed. Now, in reality, if you are looking at this objectively, if you're looking at this without being a hypocrite, you can fully understand why Russia reacted in the way that it did. That's even without taking into account that Russian peoples were being bombed and missiled, shot, exterminated. War crimes committed by Ukraine on the Donbass region, on the civilians, for 8 years, and no one gave a damn. And Putin had kept saying, sort this out, sort this out, sort this out, otherwise I'm going to have to sort it out. Nobody listened. No one cared. Why did no one care? Oh, it's just Russians. They're not real humans, are they? Talk about dehumanization. That is the very, very concept of Nazism, of fascism. Labeling a minority in a country as less than human. And that's exactly what Ukraine did to the people of the Donbass. That's exactly what the West has done to the people of the Donbass, because they are an ethnic Russian peoples. And that's exactly why Putin had, from his perspective, to go in and do what he did. And practically nobody in the West is looking at this stuff. I say practically nobody. There are lots of individuals that are looking at this stuff, but They don't have a voice. We're not allowed to have a voice. There's no voice there because it doesn't get promoted on the social media, or it gets cancelled on the social media, or people start coming after them and saying, you're Putin puppets. No. With people that are looking at this from an objective point of view, going, you agitated this. You caused this. Let me see. What's the latest? The latest is the Solomon Islands. The Solomon Islands, having allegedly signed some kind of security agreement with China. The Solomon Islands is 2,000 kilometres plus from Australia. Australia being US aligned. The US is fine with encircling China. Oh, let's have a look. What are these blue stars? The blue stars are United States military bases and facilities. And this is around the South China Sea. So there's Singapore, there's the Philippines, there's South Korea, and there's Japan, and there's Australia. The whole of the South China Sea has got 5 United States military bases and facilities all around it. There aren't any for China. And they proposed to actually have an agreement with the Solomon Islands. They've got some kind of agreement with the Solomon Islands. There's a bit of debate about what kind of agreement it is. But what's been said here? The United States is fine with encircling China, but won't tolerate Chinese bases on its allies' doorstep. Is ally Australia. Signing a security agreement between China and the Pacific nation of Solomon Islands prompted speculation Beijing plans to establish a military base there. According to China Foreign Ministry spokesman, the so-called Chinese military base in Solomon Islands is completely fabricated with disinformation by a few people with ulterior motives. Whether you actually accept that, because it's the type of reaction that you always expect. It's the type of reaction that the United States says when it's not going to do something and then it does it. It's the type of reaction when Russia says it's not going to do something but it does it. These are big countries who can say what they like and do something completely different. But this is a hot topic in the Australian media. A draft of the agreement said Chinese warships could stop in Solomon Islands for logistical replenishment, and that China could send police and armed forces there to assist in maintaining social order. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said China building a military base on Solomon Islands would be the red line for Australia and the United States, adding that Australia will not have Chinese naval bases on our doorstep. But NATO bases, NATO military, right next to, less than 100 meters from Russia, is okay. Cuba was 90 miles away. Solomon Islands is 2,000 kilometers away from Australia. But Ukraine, even with a no man's land or a border, or some big walls done by each side, 100 meters. But that's okay for NATO to do that, because NATO's allowed to do that, because NATO can tell anybody to go stuff themselves. Hypocrites. Warmongering hypocrites. The United States has urged Solomon Islands not to allow a Chinese military base in the country, warning it would respond accordingly to any steps in that direction. What does respond accordingly mean? What does the United States mean? The United States has its military bases and facilities literally on China's doorstep and deepens military ties with Australia and Japan via its Quad and AUKUS alliances. The whole of that area, the United States has to control it and has to prevent China from getting out. No Chinese allowed to swim in the South China Sea. You're not allowed out. No Russians allowed to swim in the Azov Sea. You're not allowed out. And Russia and China are going, get fucked. It's really interesting. It really shows the utter hypocrisy of the Western nations, of which I am part of, one of them. We have this idea, we have these concepts. Our democracy is good. Your whatever system is bad. This is narcissism on a great scale by the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, NATO, Australia, the West in general. What a bunch of narcissists. Let's see where to go to next. What should we have a look at? I do have a little bit of a video to show. I'm going to show a bit of a fun video first that I think you'll quite enjoy. This is from some Russian state TV. I found it both on the Telegraph and on the Sun. So it's clearly okay to actually show this. So if YouTube want to take me for it, it's like, well, this is being shown on mainstream media. It is on their websites.
Что будет после слов Бориса Джонсона об ответном ударе по России? Вообще на Британских островах, похоже, заговариваются. Зачем грозить ядерным оружием бескрайней России, сидя на, в общем-то, маленьком острове? Остров столь мал, что лишь одной ракеты «Сармат» достаточно, чтобы его утопить раз и навсегда. Все уже подсчитано. Это всего лишь один пуск, Борис, а Англии нет. Раз и навсегда. Зачем заигрываться? Другой вариант – погрузить Британию в морскую пучину российский подводный робот-беспилотник «Посейдон». Он приближается к цели на километровой глубине со скоростью 200 км в час. Нет никакого способа остановить этот подводный дрон. Боеголовка на нем мощностью до 100 мегатонн. Взрыв этой термоядерной торпеды у берегов Британии поднимет гигантскую волну, цунами высотой до 500 метров. Такой водяной шквал является еще и носителем экстремальных доз радиации. Пройдя над Британскими островами, он превратит то, что от них, может быть, еще и останется, в радиоактивную пустыню, надолго непригодную хоть для чего.
So that was being complained about in the Telegraph and the Sun, two of our United Kingdom mainstream media outlets. I have no idea how true what that guy was saying, but it's no different from the anti-Russia, anti-Belarus, anti-China, anti-Iraq, anti-Iran, anti-Syria, whatever, and anti-Palestinian rhetoric and rubbish that we get from our own mainstream media is just aimed at the other side. And they've jumped on it, and they've gone, look at what this person's saying. Russia's going to do this. Talk about agitating the not very clever British population. Which, well, yeah. Anyway, I thought I would give you a bit of real scholarly information here. This is John Mearsheimer from Chicago University giving a lecture back in 2016. And the lecture is called "Why is Ukraine the West's Fault?"
Okay, those are just a number of preliminary comments I wanted to throw out just to set this up. Let's talk about the causes of the conflict. I think if you're going to talk about the causes of the conflict, you have to come at it from three different perspectives. First of all, you have to ask, what are the deep causes of the crisis? What are the structural factors that underpin this conflict?
And being 2016, the crisis and the conflict is what happened in November 2013 at the start of Maidan through to the 25th of February 2014, the end of Maidan, the toppling of the existing regime in Ukraine, where the president ran off in fear of his life, rightly, ran off through to Russia, and then a rather nasty horrific, ultra-nationalist, hate-mongering, war-mongering set of politicians came in and then banned the Russian language, and then would not allow their police to actually prevent the burning of some 50 people in Odessa while they were doing a protest against the Maidan marches. And if anybody doesn't know, the Maidan marches were not supported by everybody in Ukraine. And then the Donbass regions, Donetsk and Luhansk, took referendums after Crimea had already left the Ukraine, undertaken a referendum, chose to join Russia. Donetsk and Luhansk chose the same, so Russia decided to bomb the hell out of their people, civilians. So, let's carry on with what John Mearsheimer says. That was a little bit of the context of where the situation was. The Crimea had been gone for 2 years. It was back in Russia's hands, and Donetsk and Luhansk had been under the hammer of a military onslaught against their civilians for 2 years.
Then you have to talk about the precipitating causes, because the crisis broke out on February 22nd, 2014. Things were not terrible until February 22nd, 2014. And that's when everything went to hell in a handbasket. And the question is, what caused it then? If you focus on deep causes, it can't tell you why something happened in February 2014, but the precipitating causes are designed to get at that. And then what we want to talk about is the Russian reaction. Why the Russians did what they did with regard to Crimea.
So he's talking about those three bits. The deep cause, the history, where it all came from. Who was fomenting what? Who was agitating what? Secondly, what was the precipitating cause? What actually made it blow up at that particular time. And then the third bit, okay, it's blown up. How is Russia going to react? And could it actually be foreseen how Russia would react?
Regard to Eastern Ukraine. We want to talk about exactly what they did and then why they did it. So let's start with the deep causes. My argument is that the West is principally responsible for this mess, not the Russians.
You hear that? The West is principally responsible for this mess, not the Russians. This is one of the top analysts in academia in America in 2016. One of the very top ones. The person that people go to when they want to know what the bloody hell's going on in Ukraine, in Russia, in China, in other areas. A lot of people don't agree with him because they don't want to listen to objectivity.
This, of course, is not the conventional wisdom in the United States. And in fact, except for Steve Cohen, who's now at now at NYU, he used to be at Princeton, Henry Kissinger, and maybe a handful of other people, there are not many people who agree with me. But I think the facts are quite clear on this, that the West is responsible. And my aim is that the main deep causes, the aim of the United States and its European allies, to peel Ukraine away from Russia's orbit and incorporate it into the West. Our basic goal has been to make Ukraine a Western bulwark on Russia's border. And Russia says, this ain't happening, period, end of story. And we will do everything we can to make sure it does not happen.
A bulwark right on the border. This is... I was about to say this is no different from Cuba. It's no different from the Solomon Islands. I was about to say that, but it is massively different. It's only 100 meters away. It's not 90 miles or 2,000 kilometers away. It's 100 meters.
That's the deep cause. Now, take it a step further. There are three key elements in our strategy. The first is NATO expansion, and in many ways the most important. And I'll talk in some detail about that in a second. But as you all know, since the Cold War ended, starting with the Clinton administration, we have been moving NATO eastward toward Russia's border. And the Russians have said, this is an absolute no-no. And I'll walk you through the story in a minute. Second is EU expansion. EU expansion is all about integrating Ukraine economically into the West, the way we are in the process of integrating Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, the Baltic states into the West. And of course, we're doing that with NATO as well. These are two sets of institutions, NATO, military institution, the EU, an economic institution. And the idea, again, is to take Ukraine, peel it away from Russia, and make it part of the West. The third part of the story is fostering an orange revolution. This is all about promoting democracy in Ukraine and in other places. As you all know, the United States runs around the world trying to topple regimes and put in their place democratically elected regimes. And for almost all of you, me included, it's hard to be against promoting democracy. We all love democracy. But if you're Vladimir Putin, or if you're part of the leadership in Beijing, when the United States talks about democracy promotion, that means toppling your regime. And you won't be surprised to hear this. They don't like that in Beijing, and they don't like that in Moscow. Right? They do not like that. Right? The Chinese believe that we're behind the protests in Hong Kong. You go to Beijing and you talk to Chinese elites, the idea that we're promoting democracy around the world, and especially in East Asia, just drives them crazy. because they think they're in the crosshairs.
And this is, I'm not sure I really need to go much further with this. I mean, the Orange Revolution is about promoting liberal democracies, of which people are starting throughout the world to see that actually it's very illiberal. It's this hegemony of the United States, the European Union, and NATO. A little bit of United Kingdom on the side. We're this little actor that keeps knocking on the door going, don't forget about us, don't forget about us, we're still really important. But I'm not convinced about that. And the three clear aspects. One is promoting these illiberal democracies as long as you follow what the United States and the EU says. EU membership and expansion, and NATO membership and expansion. Military security. We are big, we are strong, and we've got Article 5, where if any one of us is actually attacked, then everybody piles in. The EU expansion. This is the bit this was back in 2016 when he said this, and I think things have changed quite a bit. There have been a lot of changes within the EU in terms of the way that people look at it and the way that people think about it from inside the EU. There is much more discontent that's in there, and I think with them having lost the United Kingdom, and they've got a lot less money going in there from the United Kingdom throwing money in, so that these other states that need improvement can actually become net recipients of that money that's being put in. I don't think they can take on Ukraine. I don't think Ukraine actually meets the values and the principles that the European Union actually stands up for. And once Russia has finished, let me pull up. I'm going to try and pull out. Here we go. This is the ethnolinguistic map of Ukraine. You can see the sort of yellow bit goes straight across, and then up above there's the pink, and then to the left there's the right, to the west there's the right. Crimea down in the brown at the bottom. This is a linguistic map of Ukraine, so the yellow is pretty much, these are Russian speaking. The red is pretty much Ukrainian speaking, although all the way through the middle and through Kiev it's Zherzhik, actually. It's a mix of Russian and Ukrainian. I can see Putin looking at this map and going, well, all those yellow bits, that's where I am putting my border. That's when I will stop. I don't think he'll go that far over to the west. I really don't. But who knows? Who the hell am I? Who am I to think that? I don't think he'll go that far into the centre. But he might do. Or he might stop at the Dnieper River, really, as it starts going through the centre of Ukraine. He might go further over to Odessa. I'm not sure he'll get anywhere near going over towards Transnistria and Moldova. I just think that's just too big a border that he's got to sort out. So I got the feeling he'll use the Dnieper River, where it comes horizontal across from right to left, as a natural border, but he'll take a bit of the bottom, so he'll include Nikolaev and Odessa. And he'll take that. He might allow Ukraine a bit of access to parts of the Black Sea, or he might just cut it off. I haven't got a clue. I don't know. I don't know what he's thinking. I don't think anybody does. But I'm I can pretty clearly see he's not going to take the whole of Ukraine. He's not even going to try to take the whole of Ukraine. At some point, he's just going to stop and he's going to go, that's it. Don't come near us. Thank you very much. Once he's got the Kharkov region up at the top of the Donbass, the top of the yellow bit, furthest left bit of the yellow bit, I think he'll just he'll decide, I have saved the Russian-speaking people. Those that want to leave towards Western Ukraine, they can go. Those that want to stay, please stay. We'll make you safe. We'll give you jobs. We'll bring the industry back. And all that red bit and that pink bit has got a big problem. Because there's no industry there. There's nothing there. The only thing they've got is agriculture. And their wheat is not good enough, really, for Western countries. So they have to sell it to Africa. It's the only place that will buy it. Anyway, that's where I see where I think it will go. And then Putin will just stop. And he would allow Zelensky and his nasty regime to choose what it is that they do next. And from there, Putin will just react. They do something, Putin will do 10 times worse. Whatever it is, he'll do it. I will put the details in the description after I finish this, so that you can go and watch this video. It is on the University of Chicago YouTube channel. It's called Why is Ukraine the West's Fault? Featuring John Mearsheimer. It is superb. Pretty much like the stuff that I showed yesterday and mentioned yesterday. The couple of films, one being the Maidan Massacre, the other one being Revealing Ukraine, on Global Tree Productions, I think is the name of the YouTube channel that had those videos on it. If you're wanting to know some of the history as to why this is happening, why Russia had to do something, because this is what Ukraine and the West wanted Russia to do. All of it. There is plenty more from John Mearsheimer. It is fascinating. Just listen to it. I think that'll do.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.